you feel most comfortable, that is when you need to double down and go hard, because it's comfort that will kill you over time. But it's really that discomfort, that really builds that resilience. It builds confidence. When you can do hard things, when you make a promise to yourself, no matter how high we operate, there's always something that we're trying to do, trying to climb, trying to get through.
I saw that you had Matthew McConaughey on your show a while back. I don't remember the actual how long ago, but you started with this brilliant question, and I want to ask you the same question. Imagine it's 45 minutes from now, and you talked about every single thing that you like, that your life is on fire for, everything you really wanted to talk about. In 45 minutes, what would we be celebrating?
Man, that is a question I might have asked a time or two to some of my guests for sure. I would say, it's really a message around why men need to stay awake, in their marriage, with fatherhood, within their businesses, within, even if you're a career guy, within your healthy mind, healthy body, leadership, all of these things that you've got to stay awake for, and you've got to be pushing the envelope. And as soon as you let your foot off the gas, and as soon as you stop paying attention and falling asleep, that's when things get really, really dangerous. I always warn men, I was like, when you feel most comfortable, that is when you need to double down and go hard, because it's comfort that will kill you over time, right? So yeah, I would love to talk through that message in any way you want.
Yeah, there's so much packed in there, so let's unpack it a little bit. When you say stay awake, what are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is staying awake is never getting complacent, right? Never letting my foot off the gas, never letting myself off the hook. So like, for instance, I would say the past 120 days for me has been extremely transformative, just for me personally. I mean, I've been doing Dad Edge now for almost a decade, and I've gone through seasons as a dad, as a man, as a husband as well. I've gone through seasons where, those 5 areas that I mentioned, marriage and parenting, and who we are at the core of who we our North Star, right? How we operate when nobody's looking, our leadership skills, our health, all these different things that really, really have our attention, and really, really, really will impact us as a man, husband, and father. And I am a huge fan of optimizing all of those things and not letting my foot off the gas in any one of those areas. So what that could look like is, I'm going to be actively playing with my kids in the evening. You're not going to see me sitting on the couch watching Netflix, completely checked out of, what's going on in my environment with my kids. The same thing with my marriage. I've been married to my wife for 21 years, and every single day, every day, I am showing her in some way, shape, or form how much I care about her, how much she means to me, how much I love her. And I just never let my foot off the gas. Excuse me. And I've been relentless about that. I've been relentless with my health. My health journey over the past 4 months has been really, really transformative. And that's because, I don't take a day off. I just don't. And sometimes when I say I don't take a day off, that doesn't mean I go all out every single day, because no one can really sustain that, physically. But like, if I have 20 minutes, I'll go crush a 20-minute workout. If I've got, if I have, an hour and a half, I'll do an hour and a half. So, I'm not of the belief of like, oh, I only have 20 minutes, I'm not doing anything today. It's I'm doing something in those areas. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think what you said about not letting myself off the hook is, I think so many people, the message that you'll get a lot of times in on social media and everything else is like, and I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm not, but it's like, take it easy, let yourself off the hook, like, and I think there is a time and place for that. But I also think there's a message out there for, you are capable of amazing things. You are capable of doing hard things consistently. And those hard things, as we mentioned, are what's going to, transform your life. That discomfort is necessary, and not enough people are willing to get uncomfortable, like you mentioned earlier.
They're not. In fact, I think, you have to override. I think that, the brain wants to keep you comfortable. The brain is constantly searching for comfort. It wants to avoid discomfort, at all costs. But it's really that discomfort, that really builds that resilience. It builds confidence. When you can do hard things, when you make a promise to yourself, like I'll give you an example. I had a podcast guest come on a few weeks ago by the name of Fraser Bailey. And Fraser, he's got a platform that's called Superhuman. And if you look at him, he looks superhuman. So he's a vegan bodybuilder, but he looks like he eats the dumbbells for breakfast. Like he's one of the most like ripped, like built people I've ever seen up close in my life, except for professional bodybuilders. And he said something that was really, I think, inspirational, and that is, like if you look at Fraser aesthetically online, you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy, like doesn't have a problem in the world. Like mentally, he's got it all put together. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got a beautiful daughter. He's got a beautiful house. He's got an incredible business. He's built well. And you would think, like looking from an outside in, like, man, that guy's got it put together. You don't see how hard that guy works to do those things. So, like, for instance, his approach to this, which I thought was really fascinating, is he described his day almost like a skyscraper. And, the destination he was trying to get to was the penthouse. And you would think somebody operating, like when you think of like these, like you mentioned Matthew McConaughey, right? We all think that Matthew wakes up every single morning and he's in the penthouse of his life, right? Everything's operating at full speed, his marriage, his kids, everything, right? That's actually not true. No matter how high we operate, there's always something that there's always something that we're trying to do, trying to climb, trying to get through. Some of my clients right now, I mean, I'm blessed, man. Right now I'm working with a couple of celebrity clients that are really in the limelight. And these people are examples of, like, if people saw these people, they're like, oh, that person's got everything on point. That's actually not the case at all. So what Fraser said is I start every morning in the lobby of that skyscraper. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to the penthouse. And the way that I get to the penthouse is I pull these levers throughout my day that I know are going to get me there. So in other words, if I don't feel like training, I'm going to pull that lever and I'm going to go train, and I'm going to train hard. Well, now I just got a couple floors closer to the penthouse. Once I start to get into the grind of work, there are things in my work that I don't want to do, but I've set them up to where I'm going to do these. I'm going to keep this promise to myself. I'm going to do them whether I feel like it or not. Well, I'm going to pull that lever. I'm going to get a few more floors up. I'm going to go out and I'm going to spend time. Fraser's like, I'll go out and I'll spend time with my daughter, even though I know that, like, I have other things that are pressing, right? But I'm still going to spend time with my daughter. I'm going to take her to the park. I'm going to chase her around. I'm going to pull that lever. That will get me a few more floors. Another lever is like, hey, I want to connect with my wife today. I'm not going to ignore her, so I'm going to make sure that even if I feel like I'm tired or we might not have much to talk about, I'm still going to pursue her. I'm still going to act like this is the first couple of weeks of our relationship, and that's how I'm going to approach the relationship. Well, I'm going to pull that lever, and that's going to get me a few more floors up too. So the day is all about how we all start out in the lobby. And I did an Instagram story of this just yesterday, where when I wake up in the morning, I think maybe a lot of people don't know this, but I usually feel like a lot of anxiety. I don't know why. I have no clue why. And I don't know if I'm mistaking. I had a good friend of mine say, are you sure you're not mistaking it with excitement because you love what you do? And I was like, that's a good point. I was like, but I'm still apprehensive. I'm still nervous. I still have anxiety around it. I don't know why. Well, then I start to pull those levers, and I start to pull, and I start to get one win after one win. I'm like, hey, I put this down today. I'm going to do it. I don't feel like doing it. I made an oath to myself. I made a promise to myself. I'm going to do it. So I'm going to pull that lever. Over the past 85 days, I've been doing 75 hard. So I've got 6 rules that I have to live by in that. I know it's 75 hard, but I'm going for 100. But pulling those 6 levers builds tremendous confidence in me, and it helps me get up to that penthouse faster. If I'm keeping my word to myself and I'm stacking those daily wins, that's what makes all the difference.
And I'm so glad you mentioned these habits and these ways of being, your daily ways of being, because that's really what the message this show is trying to talk about. Is like, okay, first you have to choose a purpose, right? Like, because if you don't have a purpose, then anything that comes along is right? And we know that can't be true. And I loved in your book how you talked about if being a good dad and being a good husband is literally just a decision. I think you said it like that clearly, right? You're going to choose that as your purpose, and you're going to work for that, you know. And you mentioned like being a good, you know, I'm a businessman, you know, I have multiple businesses that I have to manage, and like, you know, you can't just like, you can't set those on autopilot and let them do their things, just like you can't set your marriage or being a father on autopilot and hope that it works out great for you. So I loved how you're talking about intentional daily work that's going to achieve your specific purpose, not just like what everyone else wants you to do or just random stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to. It's got to be alignment, right? And I love the fact that you have to identify like what is that purpose? You know, what is, and for me, like I really align those to like our core values. You know, like my core values. I leverage those in my decision making process all the time. And the funny thing about it is too is like I'm not a big go out person. Like I'm not a big party person. Like I actually, believe it or not, like the thing that brings me the most joy on a Friday or Saturday night is just like, you know, either in the hot tub with my wife and kids, talking to them. Maybe we're surrounded by a fire pit, you know, chatting with my kids and their friends, or my wife. You know, it's these things like we went to a wedding about a month ago, and it was like one of my wife's best friends who got married, and I don't drink anymore or anything like that. Like I don't party, and like this reception was full of 50-plus-year-old men who never got out of college. And what I mean by that is, dude, I am not kidding. Like this reception looked like something out of The Hangover. There were 50-year-old men who were ripping their shirts off and doing high kicks on the dance floor. Like that's how this group of dudes like still party to this day. And they were friends of the groom, and I love the groom. He's a good dude. But all of his friends are just, they're crazy people. Like they are like, they party like literally they never left the frat house, and that's how all these guys know each other. And I sat back and I'm just like watching them, and I had a smile on my face. I was like, this might be one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen in a long time. But I really started to like ask myself, you know, and even when I got home, I was like, I didn't really have a blast, you know, like everyone there was like hammered and like, you know, just going nuts. And it was just like, it was like one of those receptions that you wish you could have been to just to see it. And I got home and I was like, why do I feel like I don't have a good time at stuff like that? It's not that I have a bad time. It's just, it's not something I want to do. And I really started thinking about it. And I'm like, that kind of thing is actually like, I love people and I love groups, but being around like hammered people, you know, that don't even like remember your name, like that's not part of my core values. Like part of my core values are health, you know, being what's the word I'm looking for? Not you know, vibrant, healthy, you know, like I just love that type of atmosphere. So like when there's partying and tons of drinking or like people smoking weed, that's just not my thing. That's not what I gravitate to. It's not who I am. So like I have found myself in situations like that where I'm like, I should be having a good time. I'm not. Why is that? And I kind of check in with that. And it's usually it's not in line with my core values.
Yeah, I think that there's two things about what you just said is I think are really poignant, and I'd like to dive into. The first one is like, you know, shaping your environment, right? Like you have to study your own life and see like where you feel the most on fire, and you feel like things are that when you're feeling your most optimal, right? And like you also have to know when you're not. And I'm like you. I'm not going to be the guy who goes to the party or who goes to the bar or whatever, because that's not where I feel best. I'm not shaming anybody else if that's what they love, but also that's just not my thing. So I'm not going to accept that invite most of the time, you know, and people who love me know that. So I think shaping, you know, when you know your, I love the thing that you said that's like, I really love and want to dig into is uh, your decision making through your values. And I'm curious to kind of dive into that a little bit with you. I have a very clearly defined set of 5 values that I run every decision in my life through, every business decision, every personal decision, everything. It's my filter for how I make decisions. And I'm curious for you, you mentioned your values, but are they like super defined, and are you willing to share them with us?
Sure. Yeah. So my values are Honesty. So there's 150 different core values, and they're all one word. One of the things we do in Dad Edge is we help men understand what those are. And let me just first explain like what core values are, how they show up, and what's going on with those. So core values are your North Star, right? They're the things that like you do that you either feel really good in or you feel really not so good in. And core values are also linked with intuitional intelligence. So like, I'll give you an example. If you've ever been in a situation, like for instance, like I was at that wedding and I'm looking around, I see all these people having a good time. And I say to myself, I should be having a really good time. However, I'm not. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, this is like a 4 for me, like of a good time. And you really start to wonder like, well, why is that? Like, why are all these people like ripping their shirts off, having a blast, doing shots, going crazy? And I'm like, this is not the best time in the world for me. Like, why is that? And sometimes we think like, well, something's wrong with me or something's broken, right? Something's weird. I'll give you another example. Over the past 30 years, like I have just been absolutely like committed to my health. And I work out every day just about, right? Like I said, whether it's an active recovery day where all I'm doing is like walking my dog, but I'm doing something, or I'm training in the gym, or I'm doing jujitsu or something. And I eat super clean, and that feels amazing to me. Like that, I feel like I'm in alignment. And before I knew what core values even were, I couldn't tell you why. I just know, like, I don't know, I just feel good doing this. And people will say things to you like either bad or good when you have experiences like that. So I'll give you an example. My in-laws, I love them to death. They're like the greatest people on earth. I'm even talking about my brother-in-laws too. I have 2 brother-in-laws, and then I have a mother and father-in-law. And they, over the years, man, they've given me so much crap. They're like, dude, why don't you live a little? Like, why do you eat so clean? Like, for God's sake, have pizza. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I feel like absolute hell if I eat stuff like that. Like, I feel terrible eating stuff like that. Like, yeah, it tastes good for a second, but I don't. And they just give me so much crap. And my mother-in-law would be like, you know, she'll be like, my gosh, like, do you ever not work out? Like, as long as I've known you, you always work out. I was like, I don't know. It's like, it's part of who I am. Like, and I've always thought like, am I crazy? Like for being like disciplined, like, why do I love this? Like everybody else is telling me this is absurd. Well, when you go through a process, and this is what I mean, your core values are on the intuitional level. Consciously, we don't really know what they are. We just get those quote unquote gut feelings of like, this feels good or this doesn't feel good. I don't know why, but it just is what it is. And people will also externally make mentions to you of like, they'll make observations like an ultra marathoner, right? Like, here's a perfect example. I'm getting ready for my first half marathon. It's going to be here in a few days. I've never run over 4 miles in my entire life. And so like I've made a couple videos, and I tell my wife who's run full marathons, I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Like you runners, like, I don't get it. Like this is horrible. Like I am not enjoying one bit of this. Like how do you like this? She's like, I don't know. My wife would be just like, I don't know. I just love it. I just really love it. Like I love the feeling I get, and it's who I am. I guarantee there's something in there linked to her core values that links to that activity that feels really good, right? But I don't understand it because it's not linked to mine. So yes, every human being operates within 5 to 7 core values, right? What you have to do though is you have to go through a process to understand, like bring those from the subconscious level to where like it's no longer like, oh, I don't know, it's a gut feeling. It's like, oh, I know now. So for instance, health and vitality, those are 2 of my 7, right? And that's obvious, right? So I'm like, oh, no wonder I've always loved doing this, right? No wonder people think I'm a crazy person. My in-laws think I'm a crazy person for eating right, and because it's actually part of who I am and what I value. No wonder I love it so much. No wonder, like, when I get into the gym, I'm not one of those people that dread it. I love it. So there's that. The other thing, too, is, like, I never really understood when I'm at home, like, you know, why is everything in my home, like, this, how we decorate, the feeling, the vibe, like, what is it about environment? Like, I really value, like, being able to come home, like, to our place, decompress, have our, like, environment and our things where we gather. I'm like, why is that so important to me? Because other people are just like, oh, I want a really nice car. I don't care about my house. I want a nice car. Well, environment is one of those things that's super important to me. Honesty and integrity. Like I cannot stand liars. Like it just absolutely, like, I just don't want anything to do with you if you're going to lie. I never really understood that. And that's kind of like a human thing, but honesty and integrity are two more, right? The other thing too is abundance, right? Is a huge value of mine. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of scarcity, and it doesn't sit well with me ever. In fact, I hate that feeling of scarcity. I'm like, well, why is that? Well, it's because I have this core value of abundance. And if I don't lean into that, life is not going to feel very good to me. It's going to actually feel pretty terrible. So those are my core values. And so what I do is, like, I'll give you an example of how we operate through there. We don't drive nice cars in my family. Like, my wife has a minivan. I have a Jeep. I'm almost 50 years old. It's my company car, but it's been the very first car in my entire life that I've ever bought that I wanted, right? Like, I've always wanted a Jeep. And it's a Jeep isn't like a Maserati or anything like that. So, my kids, my 16, 18-year-old, they drive crappy cars. And my wife and I decided a couple years ago that we were going to take out a $65,000 loan to put in like this really nice backyard project where we have like a big patio, we have music, we have a huge fire pit, we have a hot tub, we have a place where we can all gather. And when I ran that decision of like, do I want to spend 65 grand on a backyard, my wife and I, for us, that, believe it or not, while that number scared us, that was an easy decision. We're like, that's an easy decision because our environment is something that's so important to us, and gathering as a family, our connection is so important to us. So we are going to spend money there because that's where our family is going to gather with and our kids and their friends, and that's what it's been for the past couple of years. But to really hit this story home, when we finished that backyard project, I'm sitting there with my 16-year-old who's now 18, and he's just looking around. His friends were there. My other kids' friends were there. Our friends were there. We're playing music. We got the fire pit going. Like, I was just like, man, this is exactly what I hoped for, like this beautiful place to gather. And my son sits next to me as I'm just kind of like sitting around, and he comes up to me and he's like, Dad, he goes, when are you going to buy your dream car? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, Kate's dad, he just bought a Corvette. Ethan's dad, he just bought a Mustang. And then Brady's dad just bought an Audi. Like, Dad, like, when are you going to buy your Corvette? Like, when are you going to buy? And it's funny he mentioned that because I'm like, I've never talked about a Corvette. And I looked at him and I said, and I just smiled and I was like, man, this is such a good lesson. This is such a good life lesson right now. And I just looked at him. I said, Ethan, you're sitting in my Corvette right now. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, think about it this way. I was like, I don't value cars. I don't. I was like, have you ever known me to have a nice car? Have you ever known your mom to have a nice car? He's like, no. He's like, you should get one. I was like, I did get one. It's right here. It's this backyard set. It's this patio. And he's like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I said, I could have spent 65 grand on a car. I was like, and then it's just me and you in the car. Like, I don't know how much fun that would be. And I think we'd go for rides and be like, yeah, it's cool, but that's about it. I was like, or I could have bought this. I was like, look around. I go, did I make the right decision or the wrong one? And then you saw him get it. And I was like, Ethan, I don't value cars. I value this. I value human connection. I value memories. I value seeing you light up like this with your friends here. That's what I value. I don't value a Corvette. And you saw it like hit. And he was like, this is a really good decision. I was like, yeah, when you make decisions through what you value, you won't go wrong.